Commander Zalos stood on the observation deck of the defense station, watching his world burn. The blue sky of Valdris Prime had turned orange from the fires that raged across the mining settlements. Smoke rose from a dozen different locations where the enemy ships had struck from orbit. "Sir, we lost contact with Mining Station 7, reported his aide. A young officer named Kess. Her voice shook as she read the data from her tablet. The blast took out their entire communication array. Xylos nodded but did not look away from the window. He had been a soldier for 30 years, fighting in 3 different wars across the galaxy. He had seen planets fall before, but this was different. This was his home. The hegemony fleet hung above them like dark clouds before a storm. 40 massive warships, each one larger than anything the Valdrian Defense Force possessed. Their black hulls reflected no light, making them look like holes cut into space itself. For 2 days now, they had been slowly destroying everything that kept Valdris Prime alive. What about the orbital platforms? Xylos asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad news. Platform 3 went dark an hour ago, Kess replied. Platform 5 is still firing, but their shields are down to 20%. Platform 1... She paused. Platform 1 is gone, sir. Direct hit from a hegemony dreadnought. Through the thick glass of the observation deck, Xylos could see the burning wreckage of Platform 1 as it fell toward the planet's surface. It had been the strongest of their defenses, armed with enough firepower to hold off a small fleet. The hegemony had destroyed it in less than 10 minutes. The defense station shook as another energy blast struck their shields. The lights flickered. And somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to sound. Xylos had been expecting this. The hegemony always followed the same pattern. First, they destroyed the orbital defenses. Then they hit the planet's cities and towns. Finally, they sent down their troops to take control of whatever was left. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Tan from the communication station. "I'm getting reports from all across the planet. The hegemony is targeting our power plants and water treatment facilities. They want us alive but helpless." "Of course they do," Xylos said. "Dead miners can't work. But broken ones will do anything to stay alive." Valdris Prime was not a military world. It was a mining colony home to 50,000 people who had come here to dig valuable metals from the planet's crust. Most of them were families, mothers, fathers, children who had never seen a real war. They had trusted the defense, forced to protect them. Now Xylos was not sure he could keep that promise. The communication board lit up with incoming messages. Reports flooded in from across the planet. The capital city of New Sol was under heavy bombardment. The farming settlements in the eastern continent had lost power. The children's hospital in the northern district was calling for help. Their emergency generators would not last much longer. "What about the distress signal?" Xylos asked. "Are we still broadcasting?" "Yes, sir," Tan replied. "Full power transmission on all emergency frequencies, but ... He looked down at his console. "Sir, I'm not getting any responses. The Allied fleet is engaged in the Epsilon sector. The Terran Republic forces are fighting near the galactic core. Everyone else is either too far away or already fighting their own battles." Xylos closed his eyes for a moment. The hegemony had planned this attack well. They had waited until every major military force in the galaxy was busy elsewhere. Valdris Prime was alone. "How long until the shields fail completely?" he asked. Kess checked her readings. "At current power drain, maybe 6 hours. Less if they focus all their fire on the shield generators. 6 hours. Xylos thought about the families hiding in the underground shelters. The children who were probably crying for their parents. The elderly people who had lived through other wars and thought they were finally safe. 6 hours before the hegemony troops would land and take control of their home. The defense station shook again, harder this time. Through the window, Xylos could see one of the enemy ships moving closer. It was a massive vessel, easily 3 times the size of their largest defense platform. Its weapons were already charging for another shot. "Sir," Kess said quietly, "should we begin evacuation procedures?" Xylos knew what she meant. There were deep shelters built into the planet's bedrock, places where people could hide until the fighting was over. They had enough food and water to last for months. But everyone knew that hiding was just delaying the inevitable. The hegemony would find them eventually. "Not yet," he said. "We still have some fight left in us." But even as he said the words, Xylos knew they were not true. The defense force had 12 small warships, most of them designed for patrol duties rather than real combat. They had already lost 4 of them in the first day of fighting. The remaining 8 were doing their best to protect the civilian ships that were trying to evacuate people to the outer settlements. But they were vastly outnumbered. Another explosion lit up the sky as Platform 5 finally succumbed to the hegemony bombardment. Its reactor went critical, creating a brief new sun in the darkness of space. When the light faded, there was nothing left but debris. "That's it," Tan said from his station. "All orbital platforms are down. We have no defenses left in space." Xylos watched as the hegemony fleet began to move into a tighter formation above the planet. He had seen this before on other worlds. It was the preparation for a full planetary assault. Soon, thousands of enemy soldiers would be dropping from the sky in their armored pods. "Sir," Cass said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do now?" Before Xylos could answer, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in a red glow. An alarm began to sound. The shields were failing faster than expected. "Begin evacuation procedures," Xylos said finally. "Get everyone to the deep shelters. And keep broadcasting that distress signal." "Sir, no one is coming," Tan said. "Every ship in the galaxy is either too far away or already fighting. We're on our own." Xylos looked out at the enemy fleet one more time. 40 ships against a mining colony. It was not a fair fight. It had never been meant to be fair. The hegemony did not believe in fair fights. "Keep broadcasting anyway," he said. "Someone might hear us. Someone might come." But even as he gave the order, Xylos knew that no help was coming. They were alone in the darkness, facing an enemy they could not hope to defeat. All they could do now was try to save as many lives as possible and hope that somehow, somewhere, someone would remember what happened to Valdris Prime, far away. In the deep spaces between the stars where no normal ship could travel, something stirred in response to their call. Admiral Dongwu stood in the command center of the HSV Iron Providence, staring at a star map that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red dots marked hegemony fleet positions. Blue dots showed allied forces. The map was mostly red. "They're moving faster than we expected," said Captain Minho, his second in command. The younger man pointed to several systems that had turned red in the past week. "The hegemony has taken 12 worlds in the last month. They're not just expanding anymore. They're trying to control everything." Dongwu nodded slowly. He was a tall man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. Those lines had not been there 50 years ago, when humanity had first come to this dark region of space. The void between galaxies changed people. It made them harder, stronger, but it also marked them in ways that normal humans could never understand. "Sir?" called Lieutenant So Young from the communications station. She was young, born in the void. "Fleets, one of the new generation who had never seen a normal world. We're receiving a distress signal. It's from Valdris Prime." The name made several officers on the bridge look up. Valdris Prime was not just another colony world. 50 years ago, when humanity had been forced to leave normal space, the Valdrians had helped them. They had provided fuel and supplies when no one else would. They had risked their own safety to help human refugees escape. "Put it on the main screen," Dongwu ordered. The holographic display showed a recording from Commander Xylos of the Valdrian Defense Force. The alien looked tired and scared, but he was still trying to sound brave for his people. "This is Commander Xylos to any Allied forces in range," the recording said. "Valdris Prime is under attack by a hegemony siege fleet. We count 40 capital ships. Our orbital defenses are destroyed. We have maybe hours before they break through. Our planetary shields. We have 50,000 civilians who need evacuation. Any assistance would be appreciated. The message ended, and the bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. The Valdrians had helped humanity when they needed it most. Now it was time to return the favor. How far are we from Valdris Prime? Dongwu asked Commander Ji-hoon. The fleet intelligence officer checked his calculations. At maximum void drive, 18 hours. But sir, we'd have to cross 3 hegemony patrol zones. They'll detect us long before we reach the system? Not if we go deep, said Captain Minho. We could take the Abyss route. It would add 12 hours to our travel time, but we'd be completely invisible. The Abyss route was a path through the deepest, darkest regions of space, areas where normal sensors could not function and where most ships would be destroyed by the strange forces that existed in the void. Only human ships, specially modified for void travel, could survive the journey. Sir, said Lieutenant So Young, I'm reading the full tactical situation from their distress signal. The hegemony fleet is led by Overlord Thaxus. That's the same commander who destroyed the civilian evacuation ships at Kepler Station. Dongwu's expression grew darker. Thaxus was known throughout the galaxy as one of the hegemony's most brutal commanders. He did not just conquer worlds, he made examples of them. Any world that resisted the hegemony was punished so severely that other worlds would surrender without a fight. What forces do we have available? Dongwu asked. Commander Ji-hoon brought up the fleet status on his display, 30 ships total. The Iron Providence, 12 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, 6 stealth ships, and 3 support vessels. All equipped with void-modified weapons and shields. It was not a large fleet by normal standards, but these were not normal ships. 50 years in the void had taught humanity things about warfare that no other species understood. Their weapons were designed to function in the harshest environments. Their shields could withstand forces that would destroy normal vessels. Their crews had trained in conditions that would kill ordinary soldiers. Sir, said Captain Haijin, over the communication system. She commanded the Shadow's Edge, one of the stealth destroyers. I've been monitoring hegemony communications. They're not just planning to conquer Valdris Prime, they're planning to make it a demonstration. Every civilian death will be broadcast across the galaxy to show what happens to worlds that resist. Dongwu walked to the large window at the front of the bridge. Outside, he could see the other ships of the fleet, dark shapes moving through the strange, twisted space of the void. Each ship bore the scars of 50 years in this hostile environment, but those scars had made them stronger. The Valdrians helped us when no one else would, he said quietly. They gave us food and fuel when we had nothing. They risked their own safety to help human refugees escape the war. He turned back to face his officers. We're going to help them. Signal all ships. We're moving to battle stations. Set course for the Abyss route. We'll approach Valdris Prime from the deep void. Sir, said Commander Ji-hoon, the hegemony fleet is 40 ships strong. We only have 30. And they'll be defending a fixed position. The tactical situation is not in our favor. Dongwu smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Commander, you're thinking like someone who fights in normal space. We don't fight like normal fleets anymore. We fight like ghosts. We fight like the void itself. Orders began flowing through the fleet communication system. Engineers checked the void drives that allowed the ships to travel through impossible regions of space. Weapons officers calibrated plasma cannons that had been modified to function in the deepest darkness. Marines prepared equipment that had been designed for fighting in environments where normal humans could not survive. Sir, said Lieutenant So Young, all ships report ready for void jump. Course plotted for the Abyss route. Take us in, Dongwu ordered. The Iron Providence shuddered as its void drive engaged. Outside the windows, normal space twisted and folded in ways that hurt to look at. Stars became streaks of light, then faded entirely. The ship entered a region of space that existed between realities, where the normal laws of physics did not apply. This was humanity's domain now. For 50 years, they had learned to call the void home. They had adapted to environments that would kill any other species. They had become something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. As the fleet moved through the impossible darkness of the Abyss route, Dongwu thought about the message they would send. The hegemony thought they could do whatever they wanted to innocent people. They thought no one would come to help worlds like Valdris Prime. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Estimated time to arrival? He asked. 30 hours until we reach the Valdris system, Minho replied. We'll come out of the void right at the edge of their sensor range. Good, Dongwu said. Send a message to the fleet. Tell them to prepare for Ghost Protocol. We're going to show the hegemony what happens when they threaten our friends. In the depths of the void, 30 human warships moved like shadows toward Valdris Prime. They carried with them 50 years of anger, 50 years of adaptation to the harshest environments in the universe, and a determination to protect those who had once protected them. The hegemony was about to discover that humanity had not disappeared from the galaxy. They had simply learned to hunt in the dark. The planetary shields of Valdris Prime flickered and died with a sound like breaking glass. Commander Zalos watched from the command bunker as the last barrier between his people and the hegemony fleet disappeared into sparks and smoke. That's it, said Lieutenant Kess, her voice hollow. Shield generators are completely offline. We have no protection from orbital bombardment. Through the reinforced windows of the bunker, Xylos could see the sky changing color. The hegemony ships were moving into bombardment positions, their massive hulls blocking out sections of stars. Soon those ships would begin raining destruction down on every city, every settlement, every place where people might be hiding. Sir, called Lieutenant Tan from the communications station, the hegemony fleet is broadcasting a message on all frequencies. Put it through, Xylos ordered, though he already knew what they would demand. The main screen flickered to life, showing the cruel face of Overlord Thaxus. The hegemony commander was a large, intimidating figure with scars across his face and cold, dead eyes. He had destroyed dozens of worlds in his career, and he always seemed to enjoy it. People of Valdris Prime, Thaxus said, his voice echoing through every communication device on the planet. Your defenses are broken, your orbital platforms are destroyed. You have no allies coming to help you. Surrender now, and you will be allowed to live as workers for the hegemony. Resist, and you will all die. You have 1 hour to decide. The message ended, leaving the command bunker in silence. Everyone knew what living as workers meant. The hegemony would take everything. Their homes, their freedom, their dignity. Families would be separated. Children would be taken away to be raised as hegemony soldiers. The lucky ones would work in the mines until they died. Sir, said Kess quietly, what do we tell them? Xylos looked around the bunker at his officers. These were good people who had signed up to protect their world. They had families down in the shelters, people they loved who were counting on them to find a way out of this nightmare. We keep fighting, he said finally. Even if we can't win, we make them pay for every life they take. But even as he said it, Xylos knew how hopeless their situation was. The defense force had maybe 1,000 soldiers left, armed with weapons, designed for dealing with pirates and smugglers. The hegemony had 40,000 troops on their ships, all of them professional soldiers with advanced equipment. Meanwhile, in the dark space between galaxies, Captain Hyjin sat in the command chair of the Shadow's Edge, watching her sensors carefully. Her ship was designed for reconnaissance in the void, built to detect things that normal sensors could never find. Right now, those sensors were telling her something that made her blood run cold. Captain, said her sensor officer, a young man named Daeho, I'm reading massive energy signatures in the Valdris system. The hegemony fleet is preparing for full orbital bombardment. Hyjin studied the readings on her screen. She had seen this pattern before on other worlds that the hegemony had conquered. They were not just planning to defeat the planet's defenses. They were planning to destroy entire cities as an example to other worlds that might think about resisting. How long until they begin bombardment? She asked. Based on their current charge rates, maybe 2 hours, Daeho replied. Captain, they're not targeting military sites. They're aiming at population centers? Hyjin felt anger rising in her chest. The Valdrians were not soldiers. They were miners and farmers and shopkeepers who had never hurt anyone. 50 years ago, when humanity had been driven from normal space, the Valdrians had been some of the few people willing to help. They had shared their food and fuel with human refugees, even when it put their own people at risk. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Tell Admiral Dongwu that we need to move faster. The hegemony is preparing to commit genocide." Aboard the Iron Providence, Admiral Dongwu received the message and felt the same cold anger that was spreading through his entire fleet. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, but he could see the tension in their faces. Everyone knew what was at stake. "Can we reach them in time?" he asked. Captain Min-Ho. Checked the navigation display. "We're still 24 hours out if we stay on the Abyss route, but sir, if we cut through the Maelstrom sector, we could be there in 8 hours. The Maelstrom sector was a region of space where reality itself was unstable. Ships that entered it sometimes came out changed, or they did not come out at all. Only vessels specially modified for void travel had any chance of surviving the journey, and even then it was dangerous. "Do it," Dongwu ordered. "Signal all ships, we're going." Through the Maelstrom, emergency void protocols. Throughout the human fleet, crews secured themselves for one of the most dangerous journeys possible. The ships changed course, diving deeper into the void than any normal vessel could survive. Outside their hulls, space twisted and folded in ways that defied understanding. Commander Ji-hoon, the fleet intelligence officer, brought up tactical displays showing the hegemony fleet positions. "Sir, we'll be badly outnumbered. 40 ships against 30, and they'll be in defensive positions around the planet." "Numbers don't matter," Dongwu replied. "They think like a normal fleet. They expect to fight like a normal fleet." We stopped being normal 50 years ago? In the command bunker on Valdris Prime, alarms were starting to sound. Reports came in from observation posts around the planet. The hegemony was launching invasion transports. Thousands of enemy soldiers were preparing to land. "Sir," said Kess, tears running down her face, "the children's hospital is calling for help. They can't evacuate the critical patients in time." Xylos closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his own daughter, safe in one of the deep shelters. He thought about all the other children hiding underground, scared and confused, trusting the adults to protect them. "Tell all remaining Defense Force units to converge on the hospital," he ordered. "We'll hold them off as long as we can." "Sir," said Lieutenant Tan, "I'm still broadcasting the distress signal, but there's no response. The entire galaxy is busy fighting their own battles." "Keep broadcasting," Xylos said. "Maybe someone will hear us. Maybe someone still remembers that we helped them once." But privately he knew that no help was coming. The Allied fleets were scattered across the galaxy, fighting the hegemony expansion on a dozen fronts. No one had ships to spare for a single mining colony. As the first hegemony dropships began entering the atmosphere, their hulls glowing from the heat of re-entry, Xylos made his peace with the fact that Valdris Prime would fall. All he could do now was try to save as many lives as possible and hope that someone, somewhere, would remember what happened here. He did not know that in the twisted space of the Maelstrom sector, 30 human warships were racing toward his world at speeds that should have been impossible. He did not know that humanity had spent 50 years preparing for this moment, learning to fight in conditions that would destroy any other fleet. He did not know that help was coming from the Abyss itself. Overlord Thaxus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath, watching his invasion force descend toward Valdris Prime. The planet's surface was already scarred from the orbital bombardment, and thousands of his troops were landing to finish the conquest. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "all landing zones are secure. Resistance is minimal. The Planetary Defense Force is retreating to fortified positions around population centers." Thaxus smiled coldly. This was going exactly as planned. The Valdrians were brave enough to fight, which meant he could make an example of them. Their destruction would be broadcast across the galaxy, showing every world what happened to those who resisted the hegemony. Excellent, he said. Begin phase 2 of the bombardment. Target the civilian shelters. I want survivors, but I want them broken. His weapons officer hesitated for a moment. Sir, those are civilian targets, women and children. Exactly, Thaxis replied. The galaxy needs to understand that there is no safety in resistance, only in surrender. But before the weapons officer could carry out the order, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. The sensor operator was staring at his display with confusion and growing fear. Sir, the sensor operator called out, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. Something is coming out of void space. Impossible, Thaxis said. Nothing can travel through void space except... He paused, his face growing pale. Show me. The main display switched to long-range sensors, showing the edge of the Valdris system. Space itself seemed to be tearing open, reality bending and twisting in ways that hurt to look at. Then, emerging from the impossible darkness, came shapes that no one had seen for 50 years, human warships. They were not the same vessels that had fled the galaxy decades ago. These ships were scarred and changed by their time in the void. Their hulls were black as deep space, marked with strange patterns that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. They moved with a fluid grace that defied physics, slipping through space like predators through dark water. By the void, whispered Thaxis's tactical officer. Those are human ships, but humans are extinct. Clearly not, Thaxis snarled, but there was fear in his voice now. Every child in the galaxy had heard stories about what humans could do when they were pushed too far. How many ships? The sensor operator's hands shook as he counted. 30 contacts, sir. All showing void-modified signatures. They're moving in formation. On Valdris Prime, Commander Xylos was directing the defense of the Children's Hospital when Lieutenant Tan burst into the command post with impossible news. Sir, Tan shouted over the sound of enemy bombardment. Our long-range sensors are picking up new contacts in the outer system. The computer is identifying them as human vessels. Xylos stopped giving orders and turned to stare at his communications. Officer, human vessels? That's impossible. Humans haven't been seen in 50 years. I know, sir, but the signatures are unmistakable. 30 ships, coming in fast from the void sector. And, sir... Tan paused, hardly believing what he was about. To say they're broadcasting on our emergency frequency. Put it through, Xylos ordered. The communication system crackled to life, and a voice spoke an accented but clear galactic standard. Valdrian Defense Force, this is Admiral Dongwu of the Human 7th Fleet. We received your distress signal. Hold your positions, help is coming. For a moment, the entire command post fell silent. Outside, they could hear the sounds of battle as hegemony troops fought their way through the city streets. But inside, everyone was staring at the communication system as if it had just spoken magic. Did he just say? Began Lieutenant Kess. Human 7th Fleet, Xylos repeated, hardly believing it himself. They came. After 50 years, they actually came. Aboard the Iron Providence, Admiral Dongwu watched the tactical display showing the hegemony fleet positions. His weathered face showed no emotion, but inside he felt a cold anger building. The enemy had 40 ships arranged in a defensive shell around the planet. They had thousands of troops on the surface, attacking civilian targets. Sir, reported Captain Minho, we're detecting massive troop movements on the planet's surface. The hegemony is targeting population centers. I can see that, Dongwu said quietly. Signal the fleet, we're going to ghost protocol. I want every ship to disappear from their sensors. Throughout the human fleet, specialized systems activated. These were technologies developed during 50 years in the void, methods of bending light and energy that made the ships nearly invisible. One by one, the human vessels faded from hegemony sensors. Where did they go? Demanded Thaxis, staring at his now empty tactical display. 30 ships don't just disappear. Sir, his sensor operator said nervously, I'm reading energy signatures, but I can't get a lock on their positions. It's like they're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The first sign of the human attack came when the hegemony cruiser Vengeance simply exploded. One moment it was there, maintaining position in the defensive formation. The next moment it was expanding debris and superheated gas. What happened? Thaxis roared. What destroyed the Vengeance? Before anyone could answer, 2 more hegemony ships died in balls of plasma fire. The human fleet was attacking from positions that should have been impossible, striking with weapons that seemed to tear holes in space itself. Captain Hyjin's Shadow's Edge materialized directly behind a hegemony destroyer, fired a devastating salvo from point-blank range, then vanished back into the void before the enemy could return fire. Her ship moved like a ghost, appearing just long enough to kill before disappearing again. This is impossible, Thaxis shouted. Ships can't just phase in and out of reality. But the humans had learned to do exactly that during their 50 years. In the void, they had adapted to fighting in regions of space where normal physics did not apply. Now they brought those skills to bear against an enemy that had never faced anything like them. The battle became a nightmare for the hegemony fleet. They were fighting an enemy they could barely see, using weapons they did not understand, employing tactics that defied everything they knew about space combat. Human ships appeared from impossible angles, struck with devastating force, then vanished before the hegemony could respond. Commander Ji-hoon coordinated the information warfare from his position on the Iron Providence. He hacked into hegemony communication systems, flooding their networks with false data and spreading panic through their ranks. Hegemony troops on the planet began receiving contradictory orders, their officers unable to maintain command and control. Sir, reported Daxis's tactical officer, his voice shaking, we've lost 12 ships in the last 10 minutes. Our formation is breaking apart. The crews are requesting permission to retreat. No, Thaxis snarled. We don't retreat from extinct species. All ships focus fire on Sector 7. That's where their command ship has to be. But the Iron Providence was not in Sector 7. It was directly above the Dominion's Wrath, invisible to their sensors, preparing to deliver a message that the galaxy would never forget. Admiral Dongwu opened a communication channel to the hegemony flagship. When Naxxus's face appeared on the screen, the human admiral spoke in a voice as cold as the void itself. Overlord. Thaxus, you thought no help was coming for these people. You were wrong. Then the Iron Providence fired every weapon it had directly into the hegemony flagship's bridge. The bridge of the Dominion's Wrath erupted in flames and twisted metal as the Iron Providence's weapons tore through its shields like they were made of paper. Overlord Thaxus was thrown to the floor as his flagship shuddered under the impossible. Assault damage report. He shouted over the sound of alarms and escaping atmosphere. Hull breach on decks 12 through 18, his surviving tactical officer reported, blood running down his face from a head wound. Main engines are offline. Weapon systems are down to 30%. Sir, how did they get so close without us detecting them? Thaxus pulled himself back to his feet, staring at the main display that showed the human fleet materializing all around his forces like ghosts becoming solid. These were not the same humans who had fled the galaxy 50 years ago. These ships moved through space in ways that violated every law of physics he knew. All ships, he broadcast to his remaining fleet, converge on the human command vessel. Focus all fire on that position. But when his ships turned their weapons toward where the Iron Providence had been, they found nothing but empty space. The human flagship had vanished again, leaving only the wreckage of 3 more hegemony cruisers that had been destroyed in the few seconds it had been visible. On the planet's surface, Major Taehyun of the Human Marine Corps was leading his troops through the burning streets of New Seoul. His soldiers wore armor that had been designed for operations in the void black suits that seemed to absorb light, equipped with weapons that could function in any environment. Contact front, reported Sergeant Yujin over the communication system. Hegemony troops 2 blocks ahead. They're forcing civilians out of a shelter. Taehyun could see the scene through his helmet's enhanced vision systems. Hegemony soldiers. were dragging families from an underground shelter, separating parents from children. Some of the soldiers were laughing as they terrorized the helpless civilians. "Ghost protocol," Taehyun ordered. "Let's show them what real soldiers look like." The human Marines activated their stealth systems and disappeared from normal sight. They moved through the ruined city like shadows, positioning themselves around the hegemony troops who continued their abuse of civilians, unaware that death was closing in around them. When the attack came, it was swift and merciless. The hegemony soldiers found themselves facing enemies they could not see, being struck down by weapons they did not understand. In less than 2 minutes, every enemy soldier in the area was dead, and the civilians were free. "Thank you," whispered an elderly Valdrian woman as she hugged her granddaughter. "We thought no one was coming to help us." "We remember our friends," Taehyun replied in careful Valdrian. "Always." In space, the battle was turning into a complete disaster for the hegemony. Ships that had seemed invincible were being torn apart by weapons that fired bolts of pure void energy. Admiral Dongwu's fleet moved through the enemy formation like apex predators, striking from impossible angles before vanishing back into the darkness between realities. Captain Haijin's Shadow's Edge had destroyed 6 enemy vessels single-handedly, appearing behind them like a nightmare before disappearing again. Her crew worked with mechanical precision, loading and firing void-modified torpedoes that could track targets through folded space. "Captain," reported her weapons officer, a woman named Yunji, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Ion Providence. Admiral Dongwu wants us to secure the jump points." "Understood," Haijin replied. "Deploy the void mines. If any hegemony ships try to run, they'll find the exit routes blocked." The void mines were another piece of technology that humanity had developed during their exile. They existed partially outside normal space, making them nearly impossible to detect until they activated. Once deployed around a system's jump points, they could trap an entire fleet. On his damaged flagship, Thaxus finally realized the true scope of the disaster. His fleet of 40 ships had been reduced to 23 in less than an hour. The humans were not just winning, they were demonstrating technologies that made his forces look primitive. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "I'm receiving surrender requests from 7 of our remaining ships. Their captains are requesting permission to withdraw from the battle." For the first time in his career, Thaxus considered retreat. But the hegemony did not tolerate failure, especially not from commanders who had boasted about their invincibility. If he returned home defeated, he would face execution. "No surrender," he ordered. "Signal all remaining ships. We fight to the death." But his crews were already breaking. The human fleet had shattered their formation and their morale. Hegemony soldiers who had never known fear were now facing an enemy that seemed to come from their darkest nightmares. "Commander." Ji-hoon intercepted the hegemony communications and broadcast a message on all frequencies. "Hegemony forces, this is the human 7th Fleet. You are surrounded and outmatched. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to galactic war conventions. Continue fighting, and you will be destroyed." Several hegemony ships immediately powered down their weapons and began broadcasting surrender signals. Their crews had no desire to die for a commander who was leading them into a hopeless battle. Thaxus watched in rage as his fleet disintegrated around him. "Cowards!" he screamed. "We are the hegemony. We do not surrender to extinct species." "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "they're not extinct. They're right here, and they're destroying us." The Iron Providence materialized directly in front of the Dominion's wrath, its weapons trained on the hegemony flagship's bridge. Admiral Dongwu's voice came over the communication system, calm and implacable. "Overlord Thaxus, your fleet is defeated. Your troops on the planet are surrounded. You have 2 choices, surrender and face trial for war crimes, or die here with your ship." Thaxus stared at the human admiral on his screen. This man looked older than his years, marked by decades in the void, but his eyes held a determination that could not be broken. "You think you've won?" Thaxus snarled. "The hegemony has 1,000 fleets. We will return with overwhelming force." We will burn every human world until— You assume we have worlds to burn, Dongwu interrupted. We live in the void now. Thaxis, we are everywhere and nowhere. We are the darkness between the stars, and we remember every innocent life you've taken. The Iron Providence fired a single, precise shot that destroyed the Dominion's Wrath's bridge. Overlord Thaxis died instantly, along with his senior officers. The rest of his flagship, along with the surviving hegemony vessels, immediately surrendered. On Valdris Prime, Commander Zalos stood in the ruins of his command center, watching human marines escort captured hegemony troops to prison ships. The battle was over. His world was free. "Sir," said Lieutenant Kess, still hardly believing what had happened, "Admiral Dongwu is requesting permission to land. He wants to meet with you personally." Xylos nodded, thinking about the message this battle would send across the galaxy. The hegemony had thought they could terrorize innocent worlds without consequence. They had thought no help was coming. They had been very, very wrong. The meeting took place in what had once been the main conference room of the Valdrian Defense Command. The walls were cracked from the bombardment, and emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the room. But the important thing was that the room still existed along with the people who had built it. Commander Zalos stood as Admiral Dongwu entered. The human commander was not what he had expected. Dongwu was tall and lean, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. His uniform was black, marked with symbols that seemed to shift in the light. He looked like a man who had seen too much and remembered all of it. "Commander Xylos," Dongwu said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "It's good to see you alive." "Admiral," Xylos replied, shaking the offered hand, "I have to ask, where have you been? The galaxy thought humanity was extinct." Dongwu walked to the damaged window and looked out at the city below. Human marines were helping Valdrian civilians clear debris from the streets. Children who had been hiding in shelters were playing in the sunlight again. "We went where no one else could follow," he said quietly. "The deep void, the spaces between galaxies where normal life cannot exist. We learned to call the darkness home." Lieutenant So Young entered the room carrying data tablets. She was young, maybe 25, with the pale skin of someone who had spent her entire life aboard ships. When she spoke, it was with the accent of someone who had been born in the void fleets. "Sir," she said to Dongwu, "I have the casualty reports from the surface operations." Valdrian civilian casualties were minimal. "We managed to stop most of the hegemony ground assault before they reached the civilian shelters." "What about our own losses?" Xylos asked. 3 human marines wounded, none killed, So Young reported. The hegemony forces were not prepared for void warfare tactics. Dongwu nodded. 50 years ago, when we left normal space, we were refugees. We had lost our homes, our colonies, everything we had built. The galaxy had decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to remain. He turned back to face Xylos. The Valdrians were different. When our evacuation ships needed fuel and supplies, you provided them. When other worlds turned us away, you gave us safe harbor. You risked your own safety to help human families escape. We did what was right, Xylos said simply. "Yes," Dongwu agreed. "And now we have returned the favor." Captain Minho joined them, along with Captain Haijin. From the Shadow's Edge, both officers had the same pale complexion and void-adapted features as the rest of the human crew. "Admiral," Minho reported, "we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. News of the battle is spreading fast. Hegemony forces in 12 systems are requesting immediate reinforcements." "And our other fleets?" Dongwu asked. "The third fleet engaged hegemony forces at Kepler Station 2 hours ago. The 5th fleet is moving toward the Centauri cluster. The 9th fleet has appeared in the core worlds." Xylos stared at them. "Other fleets? How many ships do you have?" "Enough," Dongwu said. "We spent 50 years building in the void. We learned to mine dark matter, to harvest energy from black holes, to construct shipyards in the spaces between realities. The galaxy forgot about humanity, but we never forgot about the galaxy. Commander Ji-hoon entered with a communication device. "Sir, we're ready for the broadcast." Dong-woo nodded. "Patch me through to every communication system in the galaxy. I want this message to reach every world, every ship, every species." The communication system activated, connecting to relay stations throughout known space. When Dong-woo spoke, his voice would be heard on thousands of worlds by billions of beings. "People of the galaxy," he began. "This is Admiral Dong-woo of the Human Seventh Fleet. 50 years ago, humanity was exiled from normal space. You thought we were gone. You thought we were extinct? You were wrong. On worlds throughout the galaxy, people stopped what they were doing to listen. In hegemony space, military commanders stared at their screens in shock. On allied worlds, beings who had never seen a human listened with growing hope. We did not disappear," Dong-woo continued. "We adapted. We learned to live in the void between galaxies, in the dark spaces where normal life cannot survive. We became something new, something you have never seen before." The message was being transmitted simultaneously from dozens of human ships across the galaxy. Each fleet had appeared in a different system, each one demonstrating the same overwhelming superiority that had been shown at Valdris Prime. The hegemony believes it can terrorize innocent worlds without consequence. It believes that no help will come for those who resist its expansion. Today, the hegemony learned how wrong it was. On his flagship in the Centauri cluster, another human admiral was destroying a hegemony siege fleet. In the core worlds, human marines were liberating prison camps where civilians had been held for forced labor. "We return not as the refugees who left 50 years ago," Dong-woo said, his voice carrying across the galaxy. "We return as guardians. We remember our friends, and we remember our enemies. The void has made us strong, and from its depths we have come home." The broadcast ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. Then slowly, responses began to come in. On worlds that had been under hegemony occupation, people began to hope again. In allied space, military commanders began to believe that the war could actually be one dot in hegemony space. Panic spread through their fleets. The species they had dismissed as extinct had returned with technology and tactics beyond anything they had ever encountered. "Sir," Lieutenant So-young reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from hegemony forces in 17 systems. Their commanders are requesting terms." "Standard terms," Dong-woo replied. "Full surrender, war crimes trials for their officers, reparations to their victims. And they will never again threaten innocent worlds while humanity exists to stop them." "Commander." Xylos looked out at the city below, where Valdrian and human crews were working together to repair the damage from the battle. Children were playing in the streets again, their laughter carrying on the wind. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we rebuild," Dong-woo said. "The galaxy has been at war for too long. It's time for peace. But it will be a peace protected by those who understand the cost of losing it." Captain Haijin approached the window. "Admiral, the fleet is ready to depart. Where do we go next?" Dong-woo smiled, and for the first time it was not a cold expression. "Wherever help is needed. The void taught us to be patient, to watch, to wait for the right moment. That moment has come. The galaxy will know that humanity has returned, and that we will never again allow the innocent to face darkness alone." As the human fleet prepared to depart Valdris Prime, their ships began to fade back into the void. But they left behind something that had been missing from the galaxy for 50 years. Hope. The message was clear to every world, every species, every being who had thought themselves helpless against the forces of oppression. They were not alone. In the darkness between the stars, humanity waited and watched. And when help was needed most, when all seemed lost, they would come roaring from the abyss itself. The hegemony's expansion had ended. The galaxy's nightmare was over. And in the deep void where normal life could not exist, humanity continued its eternal vigil, guardians of the light they had helped to restore.